We're excited to do this today, aren't we, Paul?
Yeah, we're excited to be here too.
Yeah, this is exciting. We go to a number of conferences. We're an AI technology provider, and I mean, there's a lot of buzz around this in the industry. We were at the FINRA conference back in May, and I mean, FINRA themselves were saying that they're leveraging artificial intelligence for surveillance themselves. So what we're going to do on this webinar for each of our attendees is just try to dig deep and cut out a lot of the noise in AI for compliance in financial services industry. So today, to introduce myself, I'm Ryan Stevenson. I'm our founding sales leader here at Hadrius. I came over here just over a year ago. My background is on the firm side. I worked at a dual registrant for about 7 years. I had a book of business. I was an advisor. I also worked for the back office. I had my series 24, 7, 24, 63, and 65, specifically to be exact. So I've got a compliance background. And so some of my context that I bring here to Hadrius is from experience from my time on the firm side as a compliance officer. So that's my background. And Paul, if you would like to introduce yourself.
Sure. So my name is Paul Murdock. I've been around a bit. I originally started my career with what is now FINRA back in the mid-'80s as a securities regulators for about 7 years with FINRA before moving over into CCO roles at Prudential, other shops such as BlackRock, and other broker dealers and investment advisors. So I've always had responsibility on kind of both sides of dial, buy side and sell side, so to speak. But then went into consulting and ran a number of consulting practices for some big four, particularly E&Y, where I ran the consulting practice. Then after that, Wolters Kluwer and so forth. But more importantly, what I bring to the table is not only the deep regulatory domain expertise, but also consultant working with firms such as Hadrius now, since we are at a time where the industry is changing, the landscape is changing. The reason we're doing AI right now is because not only is AI a buzzword, but it's really the future. I mean, we talked about, buzzwords before like blockchain and that kind of, it's still there, but not as kind of robust as people thought it would be. But AI is in everything from your cars to regulatory software, you name it. So it's here to stay. So I'm excited that we have an opportunity to partner with Ryan's firm, and we're forward looking towards the future, and let's see how we can bring AI, some of the concepts, but more importantly, the practicality that a firm like Hadrius brings to RegTech, FinTech, whatever word we want to call it.
Sure. Yeah, I'm with you. I couldn't agree more that, I mean, we're at the stage now where people, if they don't see it yet, they've got to see it soon. That, like you mentioned, artificial intelligence is here to stay. It's going nowhere. If anything, it's just going to start getting more and more ingrained in our day-to-day lives. And it's almost to the point now where if let's say you're in an examination and you tell a regulator that you don't use AI, that's going to raise red flags, if anything. And so I could not agree with you more that we're to that point where firms need to start leaning into it because all of their peers are, and even our regulators are. For a bit of a background on Hadrius as a company, just so you know who we are in case you're not familiar, we're a regulatory compliance technology provider that helps firms evolve into a more centralized regulatory technology platform. And you can see what I mean by centralization based on this figure in the screen here. And we recently brought on a new designer and a marketing person. I tell you, it's been a game changer having these extra resources on because we've got beautiful graphics like this that we can share with the team. And so each of these different 5 areas on the screen here are typically things that historically multiple different fragmented solution providers would provide a solution for. And Hadrius was really created out of an RIA. The 3 original founders that started Hadrius were running an RIA, were doing compliance themselves in-house, and that's where they really felt the impact on how much compliance can hurt at times. And so that's why they built Hadrius, was to solve their problems as an RIA. And then that's when the light bulb went off that this is really the business, is helping firms solve their compliance problems and helping them move into a more unified tech stack. So, Paul, would you mind doing a quick overview on MCG so our attendees can learn a little bit more about your firm?
Sure. So, you know, we are totally aligned with Adrius in terms of solving client problems. I mean, that's I mean, you know, people, clients do not call us in, necessarily to just say, hey, let's look around your shop and you're going to pay us fees for doing that. So we do some of that, but what people really call us in to do is typically there's a problem, there's an issue, and how can we help? And with our deep domain expertise from the folks that we have on our team, many of them former regulators, many of them former lawyers, most of them former CCOs. We are able to bring that domain expertise on both the advisor side as well as the broker dealer side. And in addition to that, we also bring management consulting. As I said, a number of the places that I've worked and others have worked in the shop are pure management consultants. So what we are able to do and what differentiates us from a lot of consultant firms is that we can bring domain expertise, management consultant, and technology. So I've run technology groups, in my prior life. And what does technology do? Again, it aligns with what we're trying to do is to solve problems, right? So as we go into, this webinar and we talk about AI, that should be a theme that should run through here, is that AI is not here just to reduce headcounts. I know there's the anxiety and fear that's out there, but as we go through the webinar, we'll let you know some of the things that we believe AI will do to this landscape that will kind of enhance your roles, enhance your jobs, and enhance your positions. So in general, if you think of MCG, we are a service provider with domain expertise that could solve your problems.
Beautiful. That's, I commonly get the question whenever we're talking to new firms on what really sets Hadrius apart. And that right there is one of the things that I really like to say myself is solving problems that you've got. Yeah, we've got these technology solutions, but you use a technology solution because you've got a problem that you want to solve. Maybe you've got a lot of marketing collateral. Maybe you've got multiple vendors you want to consolidate. Maybe you want to eliminate some operational bottlenecks that you might have. And so what we really like to do is just not provide people with technology solutions. Like you're not just looking to provide people consulting solutions. You're looking to solve whatever their problems are, whatever those may be. So I'm with you there.
Right.
So
I will say this, Ryan, because this is what we've experienced with client solutions. There's a adoption rate, okay? And typically, if you buy a solution and you don't adopt it within 90 days, it essentially stays on the shelf, right? I mean, it may even be less now because technology is changing at such a rapid speed, and there's so many things that's being thrown at us in our daily lives and our jobs that you need to act, you need to be agile, and you need to do it quickly. So part of what we do is when we partner with a client and a solution provider like yourself, we have the expertise to go through kind of the, let's say, development life cycle, right? And what that means is that we can have conversations with the compliance folks, the technology folks, along with the vendors, so that when we are doing implementation, the clients are getting what they need, what they expect, right? And the service provider is providing the parameters that's needed by the client, again, so that they can adopt it. We've had, large and small clients where software has been implemented, and you get to the client and you're like, well, why are you not using it? You're paying a lot of money, typically a licensing agreement. You're typically tied in for 3 years, and it's kind of gathering dust. So what we do is we make sure that that does not happen.
Mhm. Well, I mean, on the vein of thinking about different vendors and how people might look at their vendors. I mean, one of the headlines, it was probably a couple months ago, was um, back when Gensler was still in, he shared something about flagging a lot of AI washing from vendors. Vendors that have been saying that maybe they're using AI in certain ways, but they're really not. And so, thinking about how to mitigate that possible exposure there, what are some types of questions that these firms can ask their vendors that they're considering that say they're using AI to ensure that it's actually artificial intelligence and there's not any AI washing there?
Yeah, so I mean, Ryan, you may want to describe what AI washing means for the audience. There are two cases
Yeah.
that the SEC has actually brought forth and has fined the firms for AI washing. But why don't you tell them the definition, and I'll give some real high level highlights of the cases themselves.
Yeah. AI washing in the biggest nutshell is whenever you've got a vendor that says, yeah, we're using artificial intelligence for this, and that. But
Mhm.
actually, on the back end, it's not AI. It might be a human being going through and manually doing things to make it seem like it's actually getting done by artificial intelligence. Or if there are cases where maybe you're leveraging a vendor to facilitate AI supervision and surveillance, but there might be cases where maybe a vendor is saying, yeah, we're helping you with enhanced AI supervision, but really it's not operating like you're anticipating. And so, in a nutshell, though, AI washing is whenever there is a vendor that's out there saying, hey, we are powered by artificial intelligence and we're using it in all these ways, but really on the background, they're not using it at all, or they're not using it as much as they say they are.
Right, right. So the SEC brought two cases. One was the Delphia case that they brought, and it was exactly that, and the other one was global predictions, where these were two kind of robo advisors, retail firms that said that they were using data that they were gathering from their clients, right, and creating kind of AI algorithms to
Mm-hmm.
predict, what to buy and predict, and making these outlandish predictions that they could predict 7 years out, which stocks you should be buying now, right? And when the SEC went in to actually do the review and ask about the models, there were no models, um, but their marketing material said that there were. And everything else, their Form ADV said that they would be using AI, and in fact, they weren't using AI at all. It was a manual process. So those cases, came out to be significant fines because it was, the typical false advertising, not really. Saying what you're going to do as a part of your compliance program, not doing it. So those firms were fined two 225 rather, and 175 respectively. Those respectively, and those were kind of the first two cases that the SEC brought about AI washing. So your question, Ryan, went back to what do you do to ensure that if you bring in a AI partner, that they're actually using AI, right? So this is where due diligence, product due diligence is important. As a compliance officer, as a technologist, you need to really get some transparency and understand the product. Don't just take their word for it that they're using AI. Now, people are going to say, that, look, this is our proprietary algorithm, so we can't let you see it. You don't need to see the actual algorithm. Talk to them about their roadmap. Talk to them, make sure that they show you kind of some of their streams, their documented streams, right? Their process flow. All of these things are important. How do we, if you use an AI to solve a particular issue, show me on a process flow map what that looks like. If you can't show me on a process flow map, then there's some hesitation there, and you really have to think about, are you really getting a AI tool, or are you getting what we call in the software business vaporware?
Exactly. Exactly.
Uh,
Yeah. And a lot of the questions we get, because we are leveraging artificial intelligence, I mean, we get questions like, what has the algorithm been trained on? How are you refining the algorithms? Um, and a lot of people have questions on, well, did you create your own AI model? Are you leveraging an off the shelf model? A piece of input that I would share with our viewers is building your own model is an option, but you've got all these other algorithms, these AI developers out there like OpenAI, Google's got theirs, Microsoft has theirs.
yeah.
What would make a 500-person firm that has a 3-person tech team think that they're going to develop a more state-of-the-art algorithm than a 5,000-person team that only does that? And so that's where we've taken the mindset of, we'll leverage the backbone of someone like OpenAI. We'll take that model and train it what we need it to know, and then it's going to operate how we need it to operate within our infrastructure, training it on SEC rules and regulations, FINRA rules, firm-specific rules. And we do get that question sometime on, all right, how can I see that? And that's an area where we can open up the box and show you how we've got different things trained on that. But like you said, a data infrastructure map is a good visual piece right there where you can see, all right, you say you're leveraging AI right here. I don't see that in your data infrastructure map. Versus if you don't have something like that, then you just got to take them at their word. And so that's where I really stress, like you said, get the visual infrastructure of how that technology is operating, because you'll be able to see the data flow. And if there's no flow into anywhere that's leveraging an algorithm, that's a red flag right there. And also
Right.
on the vendor due diligence point,
Right. But
you've
by
got
the
to,
way, Visio charts are great. It's not just Paul Murdock asking for these things. It's the regulators that are
yeah.
asking for it. So if you're ahead of the game and you start thinking about what the regulators may ask for, those are the things they're asking for, right?
Mm-hmm.
Both SEC and FINRA, have invested, hundreds of millions of dollars in technology, right? So they're a lot smarter than what the industry is giving them credit for. At times, we know regulation is reactionary, right? I mean, that's the nature of regulation. Regulators are not going to get out in front of the business, right? Because that really then restricts, um, the business itself, right? So they're not going to do that, but they're very adept at poking holes in the individual systems that are out there and recognizing the breakdowns and the fracture in the system.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, yeah, so that's it. So
Yeah. Well, I mean, if we're thinking about how firms might leverage technology internally, maybe from the compliance side specifically, because we've got a compliance crowd on this call, how can firms think about that, where they draw that line between what they're able to automate and delegate versus what still needs that human intervention? How far can they go leveraging AI to where they get the operational benefit from AI, but
right,
they're still doing their duty as a compliance officer?
right. Well, I mean, you're always going to need human interaction, right? You're always going to need human discretion. I mean, any AI solution it's only as good as its ability to learn, right? And but it learns, it makes decisions, it helps, but as far as I know, AI doesn't have a conscience yet, right? So
Yeah, at least.
there are the human factors that come into play. So you're always gonna need that. Human in the loop protocols, not to, get too technical, but it's something that you need to be aware of, the collaborative decision making that you need to do, kind of the data labeling, training, models, looking at your models, making sure that there's no model drift, so to speak. So you really need to go back and test it, every so often. So I mean, these are things that really come into play. Some of the factors that you have to be aware of, right? But transparency is really the key, right?
Yeah,
You need to be able to offer transparency.
yeah, yeah. Do you have any like items or operations that you feel like AI is going to be able to fully automate versus some items that you think a human being will always be responsible for?
I think we could automate a number of things, off-channel communications. For example, obviously, trade surveillance. I mean, that's a big one. I think you'll see more AI flowing into kind of regulatory technology such as CATS, NASDAQ smart systems, Bloomberg trade surveillance. So I think you will see those type of migrations, right? But ultimately, um, when the regulators come in, they're looking for who is responsible, and it's never going to be an AI tool, right?
Yep.
When you look at the compliance manual, when you look at the written supervisor procedures, it has to have somebody's name, right?
Hmm.
So let's take AI monitoring or reviewing marketing material, for example. Okay, so it can review the marketing material for keywords, inflammatory words, and it can, give you flags that say you can't use those words in this piece of advertising. Okay, and it gets to that point, and now you file it with the advertising department for FINRA, right? But it's still, at the end of the day, a human has to be involved in that process. But
Hmm.
excuse me, I mean, it's becoming virtually, and let's take, again, trade surveillance, right? You have millions and millions of shares being traded, right? It's not humanly possible anymore for us to really do real-time surveillance of that type of volume. When I started in the business, yeah, you had somebody at a trade desk, and they're looking at, a couple hundred shares, per day. Um, that's you didn't have Renaissance when I started. You did, you didn't have all of those, those players in the market now. So yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, there's just a lot of things that AI can factor in and make our life easier. Um, so again,
Yeah.
say, where do you draw the line? I don't think it's a bright line test. I think we will continue to kind of move the goalposts and the boundaries, but we still need human interaction.
Yeah. And that's one of the mindsets that we maintain here at Hadrius. We're leveraging AI in a few different areas. Like in the review of electronic correspondence is a major area for us because the incumbents have notorious problems on flagging a lot of noise. And
Yeah.
so if we can leverage AI for more of that contextual review and understanding, because that's one of the values of artificial intelligence is its contextual understanding, well, we can surface more of the actual problems for firms and filter out a lot of the noise. That way, the compliance teams can just focus on the problems that need their attention, not the 95% of the noise. And then it's still, like you said, a human being that has to go in there and do their review. And then trust but verify, test the AI, put some samples in there, send an internal email that's faulty, and just make sure it gets picked up. Things like that, to where you can do some trust but verify. Thinking about things like marketing review. AI is a great area for marketing review as well. I mean, it's say, for example, that you're doing a lot of podcast, videos, long form content. Well, compliance can sit there and listen to a full hour long podcast, or we can upload it to our marketing review module and have an algorithm transcribe and test that thing in 2 minutes.
Right.
So you just got 58 minutes back in your day, and it's going to, an algorithm, AI, is not going to gloss over. It's not going to do something on the side while it's listening to this over here. It's going to read and listen to every single word that's spoken. And trade surveillance, like you said, that's another area that's a newer development for us. But again, another area where we can leverage AI for some operational benefit, but keep the human involved for the decisions. Because now with trade surveillance and AI, you can just write out your own rule in plain English and the algorithm will create the rule rather than you having to maybe get a dev team to create a rule for you over a 3 month process. And so we couldn't agree with you more in the sense that artificial intelligence can be used to help get some time back in your day to help with a lot of the manual processes, but you still have to do your job as a compliance officer and put that stamp of approval on it because you can't hold an algorithm in court.
Right.
It's going to be the human.
Right.
So thinking about if firms are going and wanting to start leveraging AI, maybe they haven't thought about it yet. What do you feel like are some good practical starting projects for firms to start to secure budget for some AI evolution for a firm?
I mean, there's small projects you could start with, marketing review. You could start with off-channel communication. Off-channel communication is very important, right? Because of the fines that we've seen over the last couple of years from the regulators, right? I mean, we're talking about big fines. We're not talking about little money here. That would be one that would be a direct impact, especially for larger firms, that would immediately, I think, bring value, right? For smaller firms, for regional firms, I think communications is one. Email surveillance is another one that's critical to smaller firms. Some automation around branch office reviews, especially those that can still take that virtual reviews are still available to them. So there's a lot of things I think like that AI can start impacting and really start showing the ROI, value for that. But again, when it comes to ROI value, what we need and how you demonstrate that to senior management is that we need stakeholder involvement, right? So you need to get together a working committee, a group, and say, what are the pain points and what do I need solved? And how can AI solve that? Can AI solve that? And those are the questions you need to start asking yourself. Get the right partners in the room. Let's start whiteboarding some of what we think we need help in and how AI may help. So you really do need to go through, in my view, data analysis. I think what we tend to do sometimes is, a department will say, hey, this vendor has this product out there. Let's start talking to them. Let's start, see if we can make some probably purchase some software, stuff like, and then what happens? You bring it back and you start getting pushback, right? Because you didn't speak to the technology guy. You didn't speak to legal. Yes, it's going to cure your problem, but everybody has a stake in it. And you need to bring all the stakeholders together, right? Let's sit down. It doesn't take that long. It takes less time than one would really imagine. But you need to have those initial conversations. You can't buy AI tools in a vacuum, right? You just can't, Sometimes we'd like to, right? I mean, I just can't show up to the car dealer and buy a car and come back home with it without telling my wife, right? She has to, she has to be involved in the decision, right? Because she's going to be in it too. So, I
Yep.
mean, you know, when I think about AI and how we get it to the shops, I think that's some of the practical things you need to do.
Yeah. One of the things that a strategy we really help firms deploy for trying to get some of that buy-in from the rest of their team is just helping them make sure they fully understand all of their current state, the way they're doing things, the vendors they have, when those renewals are, the services they're getting from those vendors. Then after they fully understand the current state, because a lot of times they might not have all that information at their fingertips, then help to map out an ideal future state. Where do you want to be? Where are the bottlenecks? Where do you want to save time? Where do you want to get time back in your day? And then fill in the gap with a transition plan that is not a violent rip and replace of your entire tech stack, but maybe you've got one operation that is manual that you want to automate. Start there. A couple months then from there, maybe you've got some other vendor for renewal. That might be a place for consolidation. So you can pull in another process into there. And we really like to take the mindset with firms, especially the larger they get, is start small and evolve into a more unified solution, leveraging the tools that you want, because that's going to be a much easier pill to swallow than saying, I want to just rip and replace everything next month. That's going to cause violent disruption for the firm. Might cause monetary disruption as well. But
Yeah.
instead, if we find one area to start with and then expand from there, it's just a bit of an easier adoption for the firms.
Well, I mean, that's a key point, really looking at current state, desired state, future state, and how you get there, right? Because depending on which vendors you have and how many vendors you have, you do have to think about the licensing agreement and when those are up, right? You also want to talk to your vendors about what you think your future state wants to be, right? Because effectively, I mean, they may have things on the roadmap that you're unaware of in terms of upgrades to the product that will help get you there faster. But if you don't have the conversations, you know, with your vendors, you don't know what their roadmap looks like, and that's very important. You know, we used to have at one of the firms that I, you know, worked for, that we had, you know, large software tools that we sold to tier one banks. We used to have user conferences, right? So you have the user conferences, and you know, sometimes something pops from a client. They're like, "Oh, you know, we were thinking about that enhancement, you know, in 6 months. We didn't know you guys had it on your roadmap." So I think you hit a very, you know, important point there. And I think the larger point, Ryan, that you hit is that vendor relationships have to be managed, right? And you have to manage them holistically.
Exactly. And one of the things that you lightly touched on there was ROI on investing in AI, investing in technology. And so thinking about, let's say there's a compliance officer who's having a hard time maybe selling other leadership at the firm on why it's in the benefit of the firm to leverage a new technology or an AI enabled technology. What are some ways that some forward thinking firms are quantifying ROI on investments in these new technologies?
Mhm. Again, some of what forward-thinking firms are doing is getting the stakeholders together, saying what are the pain points, what technology solution can solve those. Um, let's kind of you know, look around the corner, see what's developing in the industry, and what we will need to solve those problems again. Let's go back to our technology providers. Let's figure out their roadmap. Let's figure out their investment in their technology tool. Because that's something that's a question that, I always ask on behalf of my clients, but a lot of clients do not ask. What is the investment in your own product? How much of your revenue are you willing to invest in the product going forward? We've had situations where some vendors have essentially created a product and have made no investment in the product, and that usually is not a that's not a good product typically, right? That's not a good way to go. You may see them at a conference one or two times, and then you don't see them again. And what happened? You're not making the investment. So these are key questions I think one needs to ask. Hopefully that answered your question.
Yeah. Now I'll add just a little bit of insight too from just some things that we hear from our customers that helps them sell some of their leadership teams on it. One of them just being enhanced surveillance, enhanced supervision and oversight. Because if you think about, let's say just an example of communication surveillance, for example. Well, if we're leveraging a keyword or a lexicon for surveillance, then it's going to trigger a lot of noise. But most importantly, it's not going to trigger if that keyword or lexicon is not there. There might still be a violation, but if the lexicon wasn't trained on that specific violation, it's not going to pick up on it. It'll miss it. Right. We've had cases where we were running pilots with firms and found that the incumbents were missing problematic communications because the lexicon didn't have that specific trigger word versus, let's say you're leveraging AI for more of a contextual review. Well, it doesn't matter if there's a keyword in it or not. If the concept of that violation is there, it gets flagged.
Right.
But then you get the benefit of if it has the keyword in it, but it's not a violation, it doesn't get flagged because that would just be noise.
Right. Well, going back to one of our original points about AI washing, if you have a tool that's still lexicon based, it's not AI.
Yeah.
Which, to your point, you generate a lot of false positive from a lexicon based tool now. We should be way beyond that, right? Leveraging AI, it's a learning tool. So it will always kind of be forward thinking, right? I mean, that's the point of it, right? Or else it's not really AI, in my view.
No, exactly. And I mean, other operational benefits and ROIs, return on investments on things like faster turnaround times. Maybe you're a shop that has a high volume of marketing collateral. Maybe that's a specific strategy for you, is doing a lot of marketing campaigns. Well, if you have a high volume of content that you're reviewing, chances are your compliance team might get backlogged on that, or they might have a week or 2 week turnaround time. Well, what if leveraging AI to help in that review process can shorten that turnaround time by 80%? You can get out that much more volume. Reviewers can review that much more material with the same headcount. No, you don't have to hire new people. Maybe the same people can do more work because they're doing it more efficiently. And so that's where we like to really stress things like artificial intelligence. Just because you use it as a firm doesn't mean maybe you don't get to go out and fire half your team. That's not the point here. But maybe the team that you've got today is able to do their job much more efficiently and scalably and accurately. And then that keeps you from having to hire 2 additional team members over the next year because the current team can handle it. That is ROI in my eyes. And taking it a step further on something like more configurable surveillance. Whenever we were scoping out our trade surveillance tool, one of the main things that we kept hearing was lack of configurability of the rules. And so with the advent of artificial intelligence and this magical thing called vibe coding, I don't know if any of the attendees on here have ever heard of it, but this vibe coding lets you write something out in plain English and it will create the code for it. So this lets you do your own configurable surveillance where you can just type out what you want to accomplish, and that will create your rule to match whatever you want to look for. Flag all transactions that relate to an approved outside business activity, for example. So this just allows people to really look for what's important to them and make the surveillance fit how they want it to operate, rather than them having to operate how the surveillance tool forces them to.
Right. Well, that's a good example to bring up, Ryan, because there will be a lot more rulemaking going down the future. I think Chairman Atkins at SEC is really focused on crypto. He's focused on modernizing the current securities laws. I mean, look, the 33, 34, 40s Act were written in 1933, 34. Right?
They might copy and paste it and put it in a chat GPT and tell them to modernize it.
Yeah. I mean, the players that we have in the market now, obviously we're not there. The rules have been trying to fit kind of a round ball into a square peg or other way around for some time. And I think they've hit, the regulatory limitations, right? I mean, if you look at foreign markets, they look at regulations differently. The U.S. is a market-driven regulatory system, meaning we write rules to say thou shall not steal, right? You look at foreign markets and they write rules more from a prudential perspective, so it gives them more flexibility. So I think Chairman Atkins is looking for ways to create that type of flexibility in the rulemaking in the securities markets. And that's why you've seen over the last week that SEC has pulled back a number of rules that they were adopting, right? Because they're we're talking about reimagining AI and regulatory tech. SEC's talking about reimagining securities regulation, right? So we're going to have a lot of rulemaking coming down the road, and that's where AI will definitely be able to create immediate ROI as you apply it to the current rulemaking, as you said. And all of this needs to translate ultimately to compliance procedures, compliance manuals, and how compliance officers operate, right? Compliance officers. I'm aging myself. When I started in the business, the compliance officer was literally the guy in the cage flipping coupons, right? It's like telling my kids when I went to college, we used to use IBM cards to program. They're like, what is that, Dad? It's kind of the same concept. We've evolved. Now, we as compliance officers, as technologists, as a combination of both, we need to evolve as well. And part of the evolution is working side by side with new AI tools that will make our jobs easier. So it's a different type of compliance officer going forward to an extent. So again, the anxiety around AI taking jobs, I don't want to poo-poo it, right? Let's, because certain mundane tasks now will be taken over. But I think if we're looking at the future, we have to realize it's here. We need to adopt it. We need to figure it out. We need to make the best decisions based on the tools that we have, and we need to move forward because everybody else is. Regulation moving forward, securities laws will be moving forward, technology will be moving forward.
Exactly. Well, one last question here. If you've got any ideas you might want to share with any of our viewers here on any pieces of advice you might have for any of the viewers to help ensure that if they're going down this path of adopting AI, making sure that they go down that path in a way that both accelerates and enhances their oversight and solves those problems, but also is going to win over favor with the regulators. Any advice for any of our attendees?
Yeah. So again, I think, well, let's start with winning over the regulators first, right? Again, the due diligence process in terms of AI tools that you are buying to solve problems. is extremely important. They want to know that you actually looked at the due diligence. They want to know that you had, let's say a checklist with vendor questions that will always be helpful when you can show them, look, I had a list of questions that I asked this particular vendor in terms of how they're going to solve my problem. Getting anything with respect to the future roadmap of the solution will be helpful. If you participate in user groups to help enhance the product itself, being able to demonstrate to the regulators that you're a part of that. This shows your commitment. This shows your investment, not only in terms of dollars spent, but in terms of your personal time. I think these are all things that are favorable to the regulators when they come to your shop and have a conversation. So I would say, that put that on your list of things to do as you start adopting AI, transparency, solving the problem you need, making sure that, the AI tool does not sunset and you understand what sunsetting will mean in your case, because again, you want to make sure that there are no gaps that fall between. And look, tools, if you're using Microsoft tools, there are things that Microsoft used to have that are no longer there. So there are pieces of software that are going to sunset. So you need to be, ready for that. But you need to be on top of all of those things. But again, I would say as a compliance officer, you need to partner with the business. You need to partner with the technologists. You need to have, I can't impress upon you more, working group with the proper stakeholders, right? We all need to be a part of the solution. It's not just legal. It's not just compliance. It's not just technology. It's not just, the business. We all need to be a part of this, let's call it a organic process as it grows.
Yep. Now we're going to get to some Q&A now. We've got one question, and I'll bring that up there. If anybody else has any questions before we get into the Q&A, please go ahead and throw that down there, whatever they might be. If we can answer it, we will. If we need to follow up, we will. But do feel free to go and throw in any questions that you might have in the Q&A. But before we do that, Paul, one of the things we love to do is just pass it over to you to finish things off. Tell us a little bit about what the attendees should know about MCG, any cool things y'all might be working on, or just what the attendees should know about you.
Well, as I said, we have the domain expertise, and we work with cool partners like yourself, because we want to stay ahead of where AI is going. We want to make sure that we are ahead of the trend, not behind it. AI is here to stay. We're going to grow. AI is going to grow. Our partners are going to grow. So feel free to reach out to us. If you have any questions after this webinar, we're happy to talk. We just want to keep growing and evolving. It's exciting times for us here at MCG. It's exciting times for the industry. Let's not be afraid. Let's adopt it. And without spoiling Mission Impossible Final Reckoning, if you see the movie, it talks a lot about AI. It also addresses some of the ethical issues. So as I said, I don't want to spoil it, but after this webinar, you may want to see the movie.
Shameless plug for Mission Impossible 3.
I get no fees or any money for that, by the way.
I was about to say, maybe we can get a sponsorship next time. Oh, well, we'll get to this Q&A here. This question from an anonymous attendee. They said, it sounds like AI generates exception reports, or does it also review exception reports for violations and false positives? My gut tells me it depends on the tool that you might be using and its capabilities. But Paul, what's your professional response to that?
Well, I mean, it does both, right? I mean, It both generates, it responds, it answers, it gives you kind of next steps depending on the tool you're using. And a lot of it is dependent upon the question you ask to that will create the particular output.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, because there's cases where maybe it generates an exception if there's some violation in a communication. And then it might be used again in the summarization of the exceptions for the annual review process. And so, to your point, it could be used on both sides of that, depending the tool. Would it be prudent for a creator to document the reasoning behind subjective and objective drivers to set up a monitoring rule?
Well, again, documentation, as we said before, is always key. So I mean, so yes, my response would be yes. It's prudent to document any type of rule creation that you want to do. Because again, you could say to the regulators, this is the reason, this is the basis, this is the rationale, right? Not just the regulators, but to senior management, of your firm.
Thank you. Thank you. And looks like that is it, Paul.
Okay.
Really appreciate you hopping on here for the webinar. This was incredibly valuable. I hope the attendees found value in our time spent, and we really appreciate you joining us on this webinar today, Paul.
Cool. Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Yes, sir. Thank you all. Hope you enjoyed, and we plan to have these webinars more and more often here at Hadrius. And so keep an eye out on any other invitations in the future, and we appreciate your attendance today.